You could hear me, yes?
Yeah, I can hear you great.
I hear you great. Okay,
Perfect.
hi.
Great. Thanks for reaching out to us. We're having we're really just like getting this started now, and it's starting to pick up speed, and it's so important, and we're finding out such great stuff, And I was really excited when you wrote because you were talking about things I'm really curious about, and I'm sure you've talked about the store your whole life. This is talking about something completely different, and this is great. And talking about the schools, the old wooden schoolhouse PS60. But what I wanted to start off with first was you talked about you lived in the Wyckoff apartments from 1941 on. So
that is correct.
So a little step further back, can you tell us just a bit about your parents, your mom and dad, when they came to Woodhaven, and maybe why they chose coming to Woodhaven?
Well, they all lived in Brooklyn. My grandfather, who was he was an immigrant, and they lived in Brooklyn, and he had a small store on Grand Street in Brooklyn,
mm-hmm.
and they lived there, and somewhere in before the war, somewhere I think maybe 35 or 36 or something. I don't know why, but they came to Woodhaven, and the store on 85th Street at that time was just a small 20-foot front,
mm-hmm.
and they took that, and my parents, since the store was here, my father always had to be next to where he worked.
Mm-hmm.
They moved into the Wyckoff.
Okay. All right. So the Wyckoff. Everyone's familiar with the Wyckoff apartment. Beautiful big building. What's fascinating to me about it, because I always used to cross through the Wyckoff to get to when I was going to PS60, and my dad always used to tell me that when he was young, he said that was really the courtyard inside was gorgeous. He said.
At the time I lived there, already it had gone into some state of decline.
Mm-hmm.
But having said that, it was there was a fountain in the middle, a big white fountain in the middle. It didn't work. There's no water, but the fountain was there,
mm-hmm.
and there were let's say quarter circle flower boxes, and I don't know what you call it, but when you have something above your head, some kind of an esplanade or something on either side of the fountain. The shrubbery was quite nice.
Mm-hmm.
There were hedges, and there were little places where we would hide and play play cops and robbers, and it was still relatively pretty inside.
All right. So now, as a young lad here in Woodhaven, you said you went to the old wooden schoolhouse. PS60.
The old wooden school, yeah.
So now, what was that like? I mean, I've seen pictures of it, but I never really got a good sense of how big it was inside, what it was like.
So it was a pretty much a square building,
mm-hmm.
and uniquely, it didn't have a hall or halls. It had 4 classrooms, and if you were in the classroom in the right front, you had to walk just through that classroom to get to the classroom in the right rear.
Okay.
So there were no halls. There were just 4, like they just divided it into 4 rooms.
Okay.
There was the restrooms, the bathrooms. I'm going to imagine way back when they were outhouses. Now they weren't, but they were not within that building. There was a covered. My recollection, there was a covered walkway where you walked to the bathrooms.
Oh wow!
And yeah. The school had a white picket fence, even though it wasn't so white towards the end. And it had. I remember it. a real old-fashioned kind of a steeple. I guess there was a bell, or maybe there was a bell back in the day up there, and the wooden steps to go up into it. And if I remember correctly, when they tore it down, it was the next to the last wooden school building in all of New York City.
Yeah.
I mean, this thing definitely looked like Little House on the Prairie.
Wow.
It did have that look. And it was just 2 grades. I went there for 2 grades, for first grade and second grade.
Oh, so that's all they had in there, just 2 grades?
That's all they had, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, 4 rooms.
Right.
And then after the second grade, went to the old PS 65 on, I think, 78th Street. Then that was 3rd, 4th, and 5th. 3rd, 4th, and 5th.
And that's just up from that supermarket right there. So it's just a couple.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. They tore that down completely also, and that was a red brick building, just a pretty nondescript red brick building. And then from there, I went back to 97 for the last 2 years.
Wow. Okay. So so now those schools are gone. Now, how long did you live at the Wyckoff for?
I lived in the Wyckoff till approximately 50. And by the way, we had in the apartment building, every apartment had a dumbwaiter. Right near the front door, there was looked like a closet with a steel handle, and you'd open it up and you'd put your garbage on this. I guess it was a hand-operated elevator kind of thing. And they took it down to the basement from the dumbwaiter.
Wow. So now across the street from the Wyckoff, and I just a former resident sent me a photograph. It's the first time I've really seen a good photograph of it. Was Equity Park across the the street, and I mean, I've seen aerial pictures from that were taken at the time, but there was a track, and I mean, it looked like a really nice park.
Yeah. I never knew why they redid it. I thought when you walked into the park on the right-hand side, there was a fence-enclosed grass area where we played punch ball. It was sort of not quite triangular, but sort of triangular, because the street, 88th Avenue, was on an angle, so that kind of cut it triangular. And then we played punch ball in there, and then to the left of the gate when you walked in, there was a water thing for the kids when they were little. It was just a round circle with in the center there was a cap with a bunch of holes in it, and so we could not swim but get wet. And then there were tennis courts in the back, and halfway through the park it was fenced off, and there were tennis courts in the back.
Now, a lot of people who talk about that park, as I've seen it on different forums, they talk about the Parky House. Oh yeah,
sure.
In the middle, they all seem to have fond memories of the Parky House.
It was the fence that divided. The fence ran left to right, from your left to your right, to divide the park and the tennis court. And the Parky House sat right against that fence and adjacent to the swings, which were over on the right side of the park.
Fantastic. Okay. Yeah, it looked like a really nice park right in the middle of Woodhaven, and it was a shame to. I mean, listen, they still have a playground there, but it was having the track there and everything. It looked really nice. Yes,
it was. It really was a nice park. Of course, living right across the street, that's where we were, and we all know in those days it was altogether different. We came home from school, Mom, I'm going to the park. And it didn't matter how old or how young you were. You just crossed 88th Avenue. You went to your park, and nobody was there with you. You were just there with your friends.
So from PS 97, which they just recently celebrated their 100th anniversary this past year. From there, where did you go?
I went to Brooklyn Tech. I went to I would have gone to Lane, but I didn't want to go to Lane, so I took the test. And I got into Tech, and so I commuted by train for the next couple of years.
And was that you took the J train?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
J train to Eastern Parkway, down that long escalator, down into the subway, and I don't know, picked up the GG or something like that or whatever, and a nice hour trip coming each way.
Now, I just saw I was at a presentation on Saturday about transportation and trains and trolley cars, and I saw a number of pictures of the trolley cars on Jamaica Avenue.
When I was a kid,
mm-hmm.
I can't tell you how young, probably single digits. So near on the side of the street where my store was, the 90th Street store,
mm-hmm.
Almost all the way to the corner was Broder's Candy Store. Jack Broder and his wife Millie, I think, they lived in the back, and they had a candy store which had a lunch counter. She used her kitchen to make some sandwiches and some soup, which she didn't get into anything really big. And right in front of the Jack Broder's store was where the trolley car stopped.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a grandmother who lived in the Bronx. So I remember my mother and I getting on the trolley car and going down to the Long Island Railroad station on 100th Street, I guess it is, where the Long Island next to the firehouse, where the Long Island Railroad goes over. So there was a station there,
mm-hmm.
and we would take the Long Island Railroad to I don't know where, and somehow find our way to the Bronx.
Wow. Okay. Wow, that's great. Now speaking of speaking of stores, I mean, as someone who ran one of the most famous stores in Woodhaven, when you were young, what stores were your family's favorites? What stores did your family and you regularly go to?
Well, the mix of stores when I was young on Jamaica Avenue, Jamaica Avenue must have been a much more vibrant area in those days because there was a big mix of stores. It wasn't, like later on, every block had 3 pizza places. And
right.
Every block had 2 nail places. There was Mr. Kushner there was a fur store. Mr. Kushner had a fur store. There was a ladies' millinery.
Mm-hmm.
Hats, millinery hats. That was, She was a corner store a couple of blocks from where I was. The Boldenstein had the bakery, nice bakery, and then of course there were the ice cream parlors. Schmitz. I still talk to not Schmitz. I'm sorry, Walker. I still talk to Doris Walker. Her father Emil,
mm-hmm.
And his wife owned the ice cream parlor.
Oh, Wilkins.
Wilkins, that's what I'm saying. Wilkins,
yeah.
Of course. Emil Wilkins and Mrs. Wilkins, right. So, and sorry, I'm getting them mixed up. Walker was the funeral home.
Right.
Doris Walker was from the funeral home. So, Ann Wilkins, she lives in Texas now.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was the Schmitz, of course. There were the movie theaters. We had the Haven, we had the Roosevelt, and we had the Willard. There was certainly, a lot to do in Woodhaven in those days.
Yeah. Now speaking of the movie theaters, listen, the only movie theater in Woodhaven I ever went to was the Haven, and it was in its last years when I went. But of the 3, can you tell us a little bit about them?
Well, I rarely made it to the Haven, if ever.
Uh-huh.
It was kind of far down. The only time I ever went down there was, I don't remember what day it was. I'm going to say I think it was Wednesday that the Leader Observer was sold on the street.
Mm-hmm.
And the Leader Observer, the office and where they published the paper, what was his name, Mr. Cohen, I think,
mm-hmm.
Was down there. And I, as a kid, I sold leaders on the street. It was leader 3 cents. That's what it was. And he got 2 cents, and I got the penny.
Okay.
So I would buy 50 newspapers, at 2 cents a piece, go out in the street and sell them for 3 cents a piece.
Wow, so that's how it worked. You actually bought them. What happens if you
Yeah, I actually bought them. So
if you didn't sell them, you were stuck?
If I didn't sell them, I was stuck, yeah.
Okay.
And my best story, which was a good learning experience, I think I bought the same number of papers all the time. And this one particular day, I sold, I don't know why, but I sold out the papers in no time. So I was so excited, I'm going to clean up. So I run back to get a second load of papers, which I had never done, and I couldn't sell them. So there was all my profit.
So now the other two theaters, you got the Roosevelt.
Right, the Roosevelt and the Willard.
Mm-hmm.
It's the Roosevelt. Gosh, what can I say? I remember it had a balcony. It was a big theater.
Mm-hmm.
It had the lower portion and it had the balcony. I don't know what else I remember from that theater.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the Willard. I remember it was a Paramount kind of theater. It had that booth that sat outside by itself. The ticket selling booth.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty much all I remember. I'm sorry I can't give you much more on that.
No, that's it's a shame we don't have it's a shame we don't have more any theaters left out.
Well, nobody has any theaters left. I was in California a couple of weeks ago to visit a friend. He takes me to a theater where they have these easy boy lounges and a menu, and you could order wine and beer and cheeseburgers. So how could any neighborhood theater compete at all?
So now, did you make it up to Forest Park often when you were a kid?
Well, yes, I did. We played a lot in Forest Park, and again, we were unescorted, and we would go up there. My friends and I were big on cowboys and Indians and cops and robbers, and of course, Forest Park was the best place. And we had these trails that we would run around in, and we would ride our bikes into the park. We spent a lot of time in Forest Park. Now,
the carousel. Did you visit the carousel when you were a kid?
No, I really have no recollection of the carousel.
Yeah, that's always a puzzlement to me because it's been there for so long. And yet, like even the Leader Observer, the local papers, I can't really find many references to it.
Yeah, I'm sure I was there, but it doesn't hold any memories to me. One of the things I did as a kid, my father took me to Dexter Park.
Okay.
To watch what I believe were the Bushwick Braves. I think that was the team that was there. That's where Dexter Court is now. Mm-hmm. So it was a ballpark back in the day, and nice sized ballpark. And when they finally closed it down, they turned it into stock car racing for a few years, and then they closed that down, and then they tore it down.
We certainly had so much, in the way of things like that. We had a stadium. There used to be a racetrack, but that's, 170 years ago, but we had so much in the neighborhood.
Well, yeah. I would, on occasion, during the summer, make it to the Cypress Hills pool, which was a treat.
Yeah.
That disappeared also.
Yeah. I see you talked about Ann Wilkins. You're in touch with her. Are there other kids that you grew up with when you were young that you're still in touch with?
Well, I'll tell you, this is really interesting. I think it's interesting. I have it as I'm talking to you. 3 years ago. No, look at this. It wasn't 3 years ago. My God, it was 10 years ago. There were a bunch of kids in the Wyckoff when I was there. And one of the girls who lives in Canada, Stillman, she decided she wanted to do a reunion. And it took her 2 years to pull it together. And she got, I don't know, about 50 or 60, believe it or not, about 50 or 60 kids who lived in the Wyckoff, and we all met in this hotel. We all met at a restaurant in the city, and we had the best time for a few hours.
Oh, that's
It's
great.
really a great time. And as I'm talking to you, I'm looking at the book that she put together with pictures, with pictures that she was able to get of all of us, not all of us, a lot of us as kids.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm looking at pictures here in the park. A bunch of us on the slides, and I'm looking at pictures on the roof of the Wyckoff. And here's I had mentioned to you about the planters, the white ceramic planters. So here's one of the little girls standing by them.
Wow.
And we're all little kids in these pictures. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Hopefully, some of them will hear this and maybe get in touch and share their memories as well. That's the thing. We really want to reach out to people and start collecting these stories and these memories and
Yeah, because as you know, we start to disappear.
Yeah.
We start to disappear. What I thought was when we had this reunion, and I'm looking at all these older people, and it's just it was like looking at their parents. all these kids turned into their parents, and
Sure.
you can recognize it because you remembered their mom and dad.
Mhm. That's great. So now your mom and dad, how'd they like living in Woodhaven?
They loved it. They had in the Wyckoff they had a whole clique of friends because there were a number of store owners who did live in the Wyckoff, and even the ones who weren't store owners, it was a very close knit family. Everybody, I remember endless names of people who were just neighbors. But when the first television, when I lived in two different apartments in the Wyckoff. The first apartment I lived in was a one-bedroom apartment. I think I slept on a pull-out couch in the living room, and on the main floor, Mr. Kligman from the furniture store, where Rite Aid is now, was Kligman's. And he got the first Dumont television.
Wow.
And so everybody on the first floor crowded to Mr. Kligman's apartment to watch black and white wrestling on television.
Oh, that's a great story. Yeah, who are some of the other the store owners that you were, that you were friendly with over the years?
Mr. and Mrs. Mason. They had the drugstore on the corner. It's no longer a drugstore now, but on the corner of 85th Street and Jamaica Avenue, there was Mason's drugstore. And I mentioned the Boldensteins. They were the bakery, which I think that was diagonally across the street from my store. It was still a bakery a while ago, but it's not a bakery anymore.
Right.
It's somewhere where that GameStop or something is.
Right. Oh, hey, yeah, Woodhaven Bakery, sure.
Yeah. Okay. I had mentioned Mr. Kushner, who had he was the furrier. Oh, and the Gorans. Well, they didn't live in the Wyckoff, but they were friends. He had a butcher shop on about 87th Street, Jamaica Avenue. He had a butcher shop, Mr. Gora, and the Broders from the candy store. Let me think who else. Mr. Plusser for the clothing, the men's haberdashery, right across the street from my store, where McDonald's is, or next to McDonald's. McDonald's is on the corner, so it's probably whoever. Oh, with that Mr. Plusser, he and his brother, they ran a men's haberdashery.
That's great.
We had two men's haberdashery. We had that one, and then over by Woodhaven Boulevard, I can't remember the name of the other one. Can't remember the name.
You just don't get a lot of you know, again, like you're talking about the variety.
No, now it's either a 99-cent store or a bodega. You know, I don't know why. I really been in retail all my life, but I can't understand. You know, why it's just repetitive. Why?
Right.
You know, all of a sudden every other store is of the same genre. I don't understand that.
Yeah, you would think someone would want to stand out.
Sorry, I forget Mr. and Mrs. Jason from the toy store.
Ah, okay.
My father would have lunch with Mr. Jason every day.
Speaking of lunch, what were some of the restaurants that you could go and eat?
Where my store was, the 90th Street store.
Mm-hmm.
So where you went into the Wyckoff, right there on the corner, that was Jamaica Cleaners, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Next to Jamaica Cleaners, there was at one time it was a fish store, and then it became it became a pizza place, and then Richie, and I don't remember his last name, opened his little luncheonette there. Mm-hmm. And he eventually moved from that little building to the other side of me, where the luncheonette is now, and Richie and his wife ran that luncheonette, and then his partner bought him out, and I would eat there every day. By the other store on the corner was the luncheonette that was on the corner of 85th and Jamaica Avenue, the south corner.
Mm-hmm.
There was a luncheonette there. I can't remember the name.
Was it the Empire?
Empire, yeah, right. That's my cousin. If in that store, my cousin ate there every day. There weren't any restaurants per se, like they're all over the avenue now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that people back then ate out as much as everybody eats out now. So there weren't any real restaurants. You could always get sandwiches in the ice cream parlors. Wilkins did sandwiches, and there was an ice cream parlor where Ruggieri is. There was an ice cream parlor there also, where you also could get a sandwich. And where the 99-cent store is next to, in front of the Wyckoff, originally that was an A&P, long time ago. I remember my mother, being online with her during the war when she took out her ration book, and I don't remember gave them stamps or chips or coupons or whatever at that A&P. And where my store was, the 90th Street store, that was a Bohack's, also a supermarket.
What? So where before you opened up in there, it was a Bohack.
That's correct.
Okay. And the A&P that was further along Jamaica Avenue, same side.
Yeah, just the other side of the side of the alley to get into the Wyckoff. Oh, that's the Sawkins. They had the liquor store right,
Mm-hmm.
Right on the alley that went into the Wyckoff. The Sawkins, who they also lived in the Wyckoff. They had the liquor store. Yeah, I forgot them. Ben Sorkin, that was his name.
Now, at the time, who were some of the, I guess, like when I was growing up, like the famous people in Woodhaven was like Frederick D. Schmidt. He was like the famous person in Woodhaven. So when you were young, who were some of the people of note in Woodhaven?
Frederick Schmidt. Yeah, he was always. I think Norman Cohn was. I always thought he was a bit of a king around there. I'm trying to think who else I can remember. I don't remember.
Okay. I know. Looking in the old papers, I see the Mr. Walker, who ran the funeral home. I see his name on a lot of things.
Well, I don't remember him. I went to his daughter, Doris Walker, was in all my classes, 4th grade, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th. She was. I remember she had this red hair, and I only met her father now and then.
Okay.
There was another girl I went to school with was Barbara Braun. Her dad had the Braun Brush Company that was right across the street from PS 65 on the Star Street. I guess that's 78th Street, I think. He had it was there since the 1800s, that little factory, and he made brushes. He had Braun Brush Company.
Oh, and that was where was that near in relation to the school?
Yeah, actually, it was near what's the bar and grill, the famous bar and grill.
Near's Tavern?
Yeah, Near's. Let's say diagonally across the street from Near's.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, the building was an old. It looked like an old building, like it was a stable kind of building, and I don't know what the building was probably torn down because I'm sure there's all houses there now.
Right. So that's a good question. You know, when I walk through the neighborhood, you know, I've lived here my whole life, and you know, as I walk down certain streets, I see certain things, and I think back to my mom and dad, and I think back to my friends when I was growing up. Even though so much has changed, when I'm walking past, I can see things that just like, you know, evoke those memories for me of growing up. When you come through Woodhaven now, are there things that you see that just bring you back to your childhood? Well,
you know, the thing that works in reverse. All the side streets, let's say emanating from Jamaica Avenue up to Park Lane South, or particularly Jamaica Avenue to Park Lane South. So there would always be a bunch of cars parked on the first block off of Jamaica Avenue and on let's say, the first block from Park Lane South down. In between, there was never a car parked. and that's the vision that I have of Woodhaven. You never saw a car there. Now, when I drive through the streets, and every street is bumper to bumper parked cars from Park Lane South to Jamaica Avenue, and I can't assimilate or get used to that picture in my mind because it's not the picture that I have of Woodhaven.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, our roads weren't built for this many cars.
Well, you know, where did they come from? What are they doing there?
Right, yeah.
When I was a kid, probably when you were a kid, when we were all kids, we didn't just live in the community, we lived in the community. I walked, when I went to PS 97, I walked every day myself from the Wyckoff to 97, and as you walk, you see the stores, you say hello to people, they say hello to you. And you play in the community. There was no such thing as after school, you're going for ballet lessons and you're going for these lessons. I mean, every day you came home and right away we went into the gardens in the center of the apartment. And we played, like I said, we played cops and robbers. We played, there was a tree that I don't know what kind of tree it was, but it was low and it formed a canopy so you could hide inside of that tree, and we would do that. We would play marbles in the garden. We had our own little hole there where we played marbles, and we were within the community all day. The kids today, you know, either they're in after-school activities or their parents send them to dancing school or this school or that school, and you know, I don't even know how much time they spend in their community.
Yeah, and listen, we also worked in the community. I mean, that was, as a teen, my jobs. I worked at for several years. I worked at Phil's Cheese and Cold Cuts across from diagonal.
Yeah,
across
sure. I knew Phil. I was good friends with Phil.
And worked there. That got me through. That got me through high school. As a matter of fact, actually, you know, my dad worked for Pan Am, and there was a few months period where Pan Am was on strike. And we went through our savings pretty quick, and suddenly we were in tough shape. And the money I was making, I was only making, you know, a couple bucks an hour, really helped. And also what helped too was when we were when Phil knew the position we were in, and the one night I was getting ready to go home, and he called me over, and he handed me a bag, and it was just full of like cold cuts and bread to come home, you know. I mean, because he knew we were, you know, it was a tough time for us, you know. But yeah, I mean, it was, you know, the kids worked in the community, and when you went into stores, the people that you bought from. Listen, I mean, in Lewis's, the people used to go in there and see. There were people from the neighborhood. I mean.
Yeah, I mean, virtually all my people were from the neighborhood,
Mm-hmm.
and we had a couple of instances where we employed, maybe not at one time, but we did employ 3 generations from the same family.
Wow.
Yeah, we had a couple of people where we had, the grandma at one point, the mom at one point, and a daughter at one point.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So do you miss the store?
Well, I miss the camaraderie of the store.
Mm-hmm.
I spent my life there, and I was involved in everybody's life, just being there. If they couldn't get into the house, they called me up, Mr. Lewis, can you help me? Or if they couldn't find one of their kids, Mr. Lewis, have you seen whatever? I saw the kids and the parents, and it was the most wonderful small town kind of feeling that anybody could have, and I cherish it. And it's 2 ways, because I don't go anywhere without somebody, oh, Mr. Lewis, oh my God, how are you? Oh, we miss your store, and this goes on every day, all the time, and it's certainly the most wonderful of rewards, having given the better part of your life to a business, and to be so many people to say how much we miss you and all that kind of stuff. So it was a wonderful 2-way street. I'm so glad to have been a part of it. I'm so glad to have had the stores in Woodhaven, because it seems to have been that kind of place.
Mm-hmm.
And and that's wonderful for all of us, because we all walk away with very good memories.